Most of us know what we need to do to lead a good life, a life with purpose and meaning, a life worth living, and yet we all struggle with making the changes in our life that actually will matter. Learn how to make lasting changes and manage that change that comes into your life. Next on Speak Your Mind. To Speak Your Mind, I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps, licensed psychologist with the Human Development Center. We're glad you're here with us for the final show of our 4th season. And what else are you going to do tonight with all this snow? Because there's no place to put it. And what a perfect topic for the last program that we have this year, making and managing change. We human beings seem to approach change like a dog going into the vets with the brakes on. Why? Why do we do that? Well, we have 2 expert guests to help us with this question and all of your questions. So call now locally. Dial 218-788-2844 or call toll free at 1-877-307-8762. And you can also email us your questions using the address listed at the bottom of your screen. Now let's meet our guests. Dr. Charles Orsak is a staff psychologist at Northwood Children's Services, and Joanne Fairfield is a therapist at the Human Development Center. Thanks to both of you for coming out on this very snowy night. And we're going to start off the show with a joke that Dr. Orsak has been saying, please, please let me tell this joke.
So Dr. Phelps, how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know, Dr. Orsak.
Just one, but the light bulb has to really want to change.
Which really is about what we're talking about tonight, right? And I
Yes.
think kind of gets at that concept. It's a good opening about that whole idea of why is it that we approach change like a dog going into the vet's office? Why is that so hard for us?
Well, I think in a way that it's rational. I mean, we're creatures of habit. And so I actually think that we should be cautious about change. I see in the modern culture change for change's sake, and I see people who change for the wrong reasons. They change because other people want them to change. So I think a cautious approach to saying, do I really need to do this change is a good one. But if you put the brakes on too much, then you miss out on life.
And what do you see in terms of your own practice and just in your own living of life with what makes change so difficult, Joanne?
Well, I think I would echo what Charles said, which is about that we are creatures of habit. And as an organism, we kind of tend towards homeostasis, wanting to keep things as they were because we understand that. But I also think we're pulled toward change because it's how we learn, it's how we grow. And we're constantly looking about what is different in our lives or what could be different. But it doesn't mean that we have to make the change, but being aware of the possibilities enriches our lives.
I think the other part is that we simultaneously want control, and we don't want to understand some days that change is inevitable. It's coming whether you want it or not. But it's hard to give up that control.
And that sense of a little bit of loss of control that we give up when we're embarking on something new, just because it's so unfamiliar to us. And so it feels like we're giving up that sense of control that we have over ourselves. I know what to expect in my same old patterns that may be causing me pain, but I know what to expect from that. And if you ask me to change and be different, I don't know what to expect from that, and that causes me some distress then.
Yeah, the old expression that we have from home anyway is better the devil you know than the devil you don't. So I know how to cope with my life as it is. And I know how to, it may keep me feeling very stuck, I may be very frustrated, there may be things that I don't want in my life, but at least I know how to live with that. I don't know whether I'll be able to live with what I'm asking for to change. Which brings me to my notion about change also, which is that even changes that we want are scary. Ones that we seek out still bring stress and anxiety associated with them, even if I chose them.
I love that notion that even the change that we are seeking out is going to be hard for us, because I think a lot of times we think that, oh, if I'm the one who's doing the choosing of the change, that's just going to make it easier, and that might make it a little bit easier in the beginning, but that path and that road of actually making all of the changes that you need to make to get from this point to this point, that's a hard road to go down, and it's a hard road to stay on consistently. You mentioned that there are maybe good reasons for making changes and the not so good reasons for making changes. So let's talk a little bit about not so good reasons for making changes.
Well, I think that for change to take, for change to be sustained, it has to be something that you really want, that is valuable to you. So that if you're changing for other people, it's really hard to sustain that because there's no internal reward for doing the new thing. And so there's a lot of external pressure to change, to look a certain way, to act a certain way, to have a certain thing, to live in a certain house. And so I think you have to examine, is this something I really want? Does this fit with my values? Does this fit with how I want to live my life without regrets, as opposed to the culture and the people that I'm around?
How important is this for me?
For me, right. Or my family. I mean, it doesn't have to be a me situation, but is it just how important is it? Because that's the change that's most likely to be sustained.
And so it's a funny balance, because you said for me or my family, and yet we can't make changes only for other people. And so, Joanne, how does family enter into that notion of change? Because I would want to consider my husband in making a change, and yet how do I balance that with, and yet you can't do it for that person?
Well, I wish there was a nice formula I could give you. I can give you the rough outline of the effect. Anytime you make a change, it's going to change other people around you. It's going to change them in terms of their perception of you, and they may not want to change their perception of you. They may be very happily wedded to the person that you have been. That was the contract they made with you when they got into a relationship with you. So they may be uncomfortable. They may resist, not necessarily consciously, but kind of like want to kind of pull it back to what they're familiar with, because they didn't make this choice. You did. So if we're talking about internal changes, personal changes, they have a really strong ripple effect on our relationships. If we're talking about changes about what I call the externals, like where am I going to live, what kind of car we're going to have, those kind of choices, then that's about discussion, because the people who are involved in making those changes, whether it's moving house or finding the way to finance the new car that you want to have, they need to be involved in it. But the changes that I'm more familiar with in my role as a therapist are more the changes that people make internally, and then they're kind of surprised sometimes at the pushback that they get from people who are close to them in their lives, because they're making major changes, even if they don't feel it.
And ironically then, that the person making the changes is in some ways forcing change upon the other people, the other family members. Although what we also see often is once the other family members become accustomed to the positive change, actually also show an equal positive change in return.
Absolutely, and they get to grow. It's an opportunity, as they say, for growth, not just for the person who initiated the change in their own life, but also for other people. And there's a saying in relationship therapy, which is that if you're not growing and changing, then you're stagnating. And you can very quickly fall into stable, unsatisfactory kind of relationship, but because now it starts to feel like you can't move. And not just the person who wanted to make the changes initially, but also the other person is starting to feel like they can't move too. So we don't always wish for the timing, but then we don't wish for timing in most of the changes that we make in our life, whether they're changes that are forced on us by the life cycle issues, whether it's the aging process, or whether it's when your child becomes ill and you maybe have to deal with that major change and how you're going to cope with a child with a significant illness. They're still there. We still have to deal with them. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's a part of being alive and being in the world. And so getting help when you need it to maybe navigate through that change, not necessarily to make the decisions for you, but to help you navigate through it, I think is kind of key.
Well, and I think that enlisting other people in your change helps you sustain it. Because we know that if you make public commitments
Right,
to
right.
change,
So let's talk. So now
Yeah.
we're going to talk about if I want to make a change, what should I do? What should I be thinking about before I even start making that change in order to be successful? So let's say I want to start an exercise program.
well, I think we can back up because we are creatures of habit. And part of it is the way that our brains work. And if you think about it, probably half of the things we do during the day are automatic. They're habits. And thank goodness that I don't have to think of every step to get a drink of water or turn the blinker when I turn. So they're habits. And they reside in the kind of the center part of your brain, and they're automatic. And they get disconnected from the kind of intentional part of your brain in the front. So you have to first recognize your old habit. Because what you're going to be doing is changing your old habit, which is not exercising.
Not exercising.
And so we know that to change habits is you have to first, when I work with children, and when we're going to change habits, we look at, there's usually a cue right before the habit. There's some feeling you get, some thought. And then at the end of the habit, there's some reward. So that the habit serves a purpose. So what you try to do is slot another habit or another behavior between the cue and the reward. So if you're trying to exercise more, for example, at the end of the day, when you go, oh, geez, I'm tired, I need to relax, instead of sitting on the couch, the new habit is go ride my bike. But then you have to finish it off with a reward at the end. Then you get a new cycle going. And then if you do it, as Malcolm Gladwell says, if you spend 10,000 hours, you need a lot of trials to change.
And I
You
think
need a lot of repetitions because you got the old habit and a lot of repetitions.
Some of the research indicates 6 to 10 weeks of consistently doing
Mm-hmm.
something in order for a habit to stick. And I know what I see a lot in my practice is that at the third week, people throw up their hands and say, I can't do this
Right.
anymore because it still doesn't feel automatic. And I say to them, well, you still have 3 to 6 more weeks before it's going to start feeling even close to automatic. So you're exactly where you should be, but you shouldn't quit. Like
Yeah.
don't quit yet, because you haven't even gotten to you haven't given yourself a chance for it to become easier yet. So so you were talking about habit reversal, but some of the things that we know that help change in addition, and Joanne, help me out with this one. So making that
First of
whole
all,
commitment
making a
process.
commitment first to yourself, but making a public commitment, I don't mean necessarily getting up
On
on
television.
television and
I'm
saying,
going
and
to
I'm going
start-
to do this. I
Yes.
mean, if that's
You could try that
you could
tonight.
try it, but personally I wouldn't go for it. But making a commitment to people who you're going to see on a consistent basis, who are supportive, not punitive, because it is a process. You're not going to make that habit change in one go, who continue to be, if you like, your cheerleaders, but that public commitment in and of itself kind of nails your colors to the wall, and that increases your own personal commitment. It sounds like you're making a commitment to others, but actually you're making much more personal commitment to yourself. I think the other step before you even do that is to accept the fact that it's a change. There's a habit that you've got that you wish you didn't have.
I want to go back to this public commitment thing, because I think that when we're not saying it out loud to another person, I think what we're doing is we're building the escape hatch so that I don't have to do it. This is like my little secret thing that I have that I'm going to change, and if I fail, nobody needs to know about it, and once I'm far successful, then I'll tell everyone. Only the problem is that I've now just decreased the likelihood of me being successful. But if I say it out loud, now I feel some sense of that beholden, like eyes are on me. then so I see television as a good place for that. But not that I'll make any of you make commitments for change tonight, but that concept that eyes are on me, and so therefore I will raise my own level of behavior to a higher level.
And even better, find a partner or find a buddy to do it with, because you sort of make a mutual commitment to each other. So you find somebody who that shares your same goal, or a group, and that's a very effective way to stay motivated. I think where people could be more effective in change is that we tend to focus too much on the negative consequences of our behaviors. I have to change because it's unhealthy, and we don't spend enough time rewarding ourselves for the change that we make. And that's hard to do. And that's one thing that other people can do for us, by the way. They can say, good job. But we have to learn to do that ourselves. I encourage people to journal and do that, because you have to focus on rewarding yourself for that different behavior, as opposed to, oh, I didn't do it. I'm back in my old habit. Or if I don't, I'm afraid. Fear is not that great a motivator for change.
Stars on the calendar.
Absolutely.
That stars on a
put a
calendar
turkey on my,
work for
worked for me in
adults
first grade.
just as well as
We
as
give
they
stickers
work
out in a
for-
group that I run
Absolutely.
for adults, and it works very well to get people motivated to do their homework for the group. We didn't think it would, but it's been amazingly powerful in that regard.
And it's fun.
It's fun, and it's
Right.
kind of goofy, and people get to connect with that little kid piece inside them. But I think the other mistake that sometimes people make is they try to make too many changes at the same time. Because we're pretty clear that if you're going to make changes in your life, you don't want to try and change everything. You kind of want to go for a maximum of 3, no more than that,
Right.
and attach them to the kind of like the routine that you've got, so that you've got a good solid base for making the changes from. I will own I am that exercise, not exercise person, and I've started exercising, and I was never a morning person, but I knew that if I left it till the evening, particularly with the long winters here, it would never happen. So I had to understand that that wouldn't happen for me. So I've started getting up half an hour earlier.
And I like what you just said, though, is I knew that I was a person which is that when we're making changes in our life, act as if you know who you are, and don't make an already difficult thing even harder by by Joanne saying, I know I'll exercise in the evening, when you already know that that's never going to happen in the dark winters in Duluth. So limiting the number of changes that you're making, telling a buddy, making a public commitment. I like the idea of planning for the change.
Have a schedule and put it on there. It has to be a priority. You have to move it up in the list
And then
for it to work.
let's talk about what that road to change actually looks like, because I think the other thing is that people's expectations
Outstrip sometimes the reality.
right, I'm going to exercise perfectly 5 days a week for 45 minutes each time, and it's going to be Monday through Friday, and one of those days can't be Saturday, and if I mess this up, then it's all over with, right?
Well, cliche alert, baby steps. I mean, one day at a time, I think, is the way to do it, particularly with kids, is I'm going to do it today. I'm not, because if we put the reward 6 weeks out, we can't wait. So we need to break things down into little steps where we're just doing it today. And I'm going to do it again tomorrow. And before I know it, I put together 6 weeks, as opposed to, I can't do this for 6 weeks. And so I think that you need to have realistic expectations and be a little bit flexible and do a little bit at a time.
And because if you make the plan, I mean, maybe it works for some people, but a lot of people that I know, include myself in this, if I say I've got to do this for 6 weeks, then sometimes what happens is if I miss a couple of days, then I say, oh, well, that's it, I'm done. I can't do it. But if I make a goal that each day I'm going to try and do something, then I start to do it, because if I don't do it one day, I don't have to wait another week or another 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I can start again tomorrow. I don't put it off, the restart. And that's sometimes the things that people do, is that they put off the restart.
And I think restart is the key to success in making change, because we don't just start You know, we don't just start and keep going. The pattern really is is this one of start and stop. It's of succeed and fail. And the way that we keep moving up, it's hills and valleys, and the overall growth pattern is up, but it's a jagged course along the line, where sometimes I'm living up to my own expectations, other times I'm not. Then,
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think about the journey for some of my clients who have to make really long-term major changes. Is I often talk about it, it's kind of like you're on a pilgrimage. You're on a really long journey. And you may be going on foot from the US as far as China is your goal. And you get as far as the Middle East, and your feet are torn to shreds, and you're really, really tired. And you look ahead of you and you think, I'll never make it. That's the point when you need to look back and see how far you've come. And give yourself permission to rest and recoup for the next leg of the journey.
and that journey of stopping, and I love, and I do this with my own clients as well, Joanne, that stop and look backwards and see how far you've come. Don't just keep looking down the road to see how far you have yet to go, but stop and look backwards and celebrate how far you've come. Charlie, we have a caller here. Carol from Duluth calls and asks, how does a person get by the fear of change which leads to procrastination? How do you deal with the procrastination?
Oh, with procrastination. You have to start. I would tell people to do it a little bit at a time. So don't. Sometimes we procrastinate because we think the pile of work is too big. So procrastinators tend to say, "I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it the next day," and the work piles up, and the work piles up. Then as soon it's like, "Oh, it's too big. Can't deal with it." So it's a matter of taking a little bit of it and just saying, I didn't procrastinate today on this little piece of thing, this little thing, and then just add a little bit more every day. But you have to have a schedule, you have to have a commitment, put yourself on the clock, and ask somebody to hold you accountable. In terms of the fear, I mean, people who are good at change actually tend to be optimists. People that tend to do well with stress tend to be optimists, meaning they're but realistic at the same time. And so they can say, I have this fear, but there's this reward out there. They're able to see the positive spin in things. So you have to focus on, I'm afraid, but I can get by with this.
And I think you're talking about, number one, not just looking at the immediate pain of the change, but understanding that there is a payoff and an expectation that there is a payoff down the line. I once spent an entire summer running between 3 and 5 miles by running to the next tree. Because if I started off the day thinking I was running 5 miles, I wouldn't make it out the door. But I could agree, and once I got to tree number 1, I said, okay, I'm willing to go to tree number 2. We are running short of time. Joanne, what are your last words of wisdoms about managing change that comes into our life?
I guess for me it would be about accept that it's not going to be a cakewalk, but it's got its amazing rewards that go with it. Kind of embrace it. Maybe that's the optimistic piece of me, because I think that I am maybe an immediate pessimist, long-term optimist, and that long-term optimist gets me through the tough stuff, and it helps my clients get through too.
Embrace the change that comes your way and embrace the change that you want to make. I think that those are just wonderful words for us to leave with tonight. And William James, a psychologist who goes way back, and when I say way back, I mean the turn of the last century, he said to change one's life, you need to do 3 things. Number 1, start immediately. Number 2, I love this part, do it flamboyantly. And number 3, no exceptions. That means there's no asterisk next to my name, and there's no asterisk next to your name either. Carolyn Phelps, a psychologist in this century, is not going to disagree with Dr. James. I think he said it the best. And on this show, our very last show of the season, I want to send out a special thanks to all of my wonderful guests. Of course, Charlie and Joanne for tonight on this very snowy night. And very notably, Deborah Adele, David Fleissner, Heather Bates, Adam Levy, and of course, Maria Bamford. And of course, also to you, our viewing audience. If you don't watch, we don't matter. Don't forget to visit us on the web at speakyourmindonline.org, where you can find archived episodes to watch while we're on break, and where we'll keep the conversation going. And please share your ideas for topics for next season, because yes, we're coming back again for season number 5. I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps. Thanks for watching, and good night.